Hello, welcome to Macworld and welcome to our guide to 3D Touch. I'm going to show you my 7 favourite tricks you can do with 3D Touch. We'll get straight into number 1, which is the most well-known, I think, is app shortcuts. So a lot of the icons for Apple apps at the moment have a little shortcut menu associated with them. So when you do the more forceful, harder press on the icon like this and then push in this small menu of instant actions. There are things that you've done most recently. So on the phone app, for example, we see the person that I've phoned most recently, my brother. It also gives you the option to create a new contact. On messages, again, the 3 people I've messaged most recently, and I can also jump straight to a brand new message. It's all essentially the same thing. They're showing you the 3 contacts or the 4 contacts that you've most recently been in communication with and lets you jump into a message to them. So that's the basic idea of these app shortcuts, but then in lots more apps you'll get more interesting applications of this. So camera is a good one. Now if you notice when I started it up, Touch ID on the 6S and the 6S Plus is much faster. So I do that and it's instantly unlocked. You see that I was never really on the unlock screen at all. And this means, if I do it a bit more carefully by using the button up here, there's a camera icon down here that we used to use all the time to jump straight into the camera app. But we don't see that a lot anymore because as soon as you press the home button, you jump into the home screen. So usefully, on the camera menu, you can jump with, again, one press, one tap, you can jump into a selfie or a normal photo or a video or a slow-mo video. And it's a very convenient way of jumping into this. I think a lot of people are going to be using that because they're not seeing the camera icon on the lock screen anymore. And you'll find this on lots of Apple's apps. There are little menus, useful things. I advise you to experiment. Twitter has one, you can start to tweet and a couple of other things, and Instagram has one. Facebook hasn't yet, but I'm sure they will very soon. But you're gradually going to see more and more as more and more app developers get involved, and it's a very useful feature. Okay, number 2 is Peek and Pop. This is probably the feature that Apple themselves gave most attention to in the iPhone 6S launch. So if we go into email, for example, well, if you do a normal tap, you go into the email as before. But if you do a slightly harder email, it brings up this preview. Now this is what Apple calls a peek. Now once you have to hold down the thumb or finger or whatever to keep this preview up. As soon as you release it, you go back into the normal app. And what you can do from there is if you swipe upwards, you'll get a menu of instant options. And if you go down again and then release, you go back in. Now beyond that you can press again, and this is an example of the fact that 3D Touch is supposed to have 3 degrees of pressure rather than just the 2 that you got with Force Touch on the Apple Watch screen. So you do, so we've got the normal tap, the slightly harder tap, and then harder still, and then it pops open in the app as before. If you look at directions, for example, you see that as usual, I've written in an address and a postcode, and Mail has turned it into directions. Now if we just Force Touch on, no, that would be a normal one. Let's try that again. We'll press a bit harder, and you see that rather nicely it's created a preview of the directions to where we're going to meet for lunch, which is rather useful. And then of course you can swipe up and get the other menu options. Now we can also do it for a website. So you see this is a useful way of looking into one app while staying in another. So I'll just do a quick look, and I'll have a look on this website, but I'm not actually in Safari because as soon as I release, then I go back into Mail. And this is a very useful way of looking at something that somebody sent to you without actually going to the app. So it's a much quicker way of looking at different links and different directions and things like that. The third thing I want to look at is art. Sort of a general idea, but it benefits from the fact that you have a pressure sensitive screen. So if we pick, for example, red, this is quite hard to see. It's quite a subtle change, but I'm just going to press normally, and now I'm going to press harder, and you can see that the line gets thicker. So it's actually pressure sensitive and it can tell the difference. So I'm going to press normally, now harder. And this means that you can actually draw things, you can actually do art in a sense that would not be possible with just a normal series of line drawings. So this opens a lot more. I mean, this is only notes, this is not a particularly advanced artistic app, but it means that when all the app developers of the nice apps, the nice drawing and illustration apps, they will be able to unlock a bit more potential with this technology. Number 4 is Peak Zoom, and this is quite niche. I'm just going to show you how you turn it on. In fact, it's in accessibility. If you go to zoom, there we go, we've got zoom on, but we want to have show controller, and then this appears. So let's say, for example, we're on this web page, it's quite hard to read. You can, if you have zoom turned on, you can do a 3-finger tap, double tap, and you zoom in. It's just a little bit awkward. With this controller, you do a force tap on the controller and it zooms in the screen, which can be quite nice. So we want to see what's Johnny Bairstow score, 66, very nice. Let go and it goes back to a normal view, and it's quite a nice way of looking at it. I don't particularly like having that little icon there, it gets in the way a little bit, but it's a very nice way of using 3D touch to get more uses out of one icon, because the normal function is you press it and then you get this menu, but you can do a force touch and it does it automatically. It's very useful. For number 5, we're going to come back to notes. Okay, we've done a bit of typing there with some random letters. If we do a force touch, or a harder touch essentially, on any of these letters, then you'll see that the letters have greyed out, they've disappeared, and now what's happening is I have control over a cursor. Now I release and I'm where I want it to be. You're not seeing it at its best at the moment, clearly, because there's only one line of text. But if you have many paragraphs of text, particularly if they're small, it's much easier rather than having to tap and then it's a bit clumsy. Provided we use the finger, we can actually be basically as accurate as if we had a mouse. So that's a useful little tip there. Number 6, this is a very simple one. We'll go back to the home screen for this. If you want to get to the app switcher, if you do a double tap like that, and that's where you get to see all the apps you've got open and move between them. Instead of doing a double tap, which I suppose is slightly more inconvenient, what you can do is do a force tap, a harder tap, or a harder press I should say, on the very edge of the screen. So if you watch this, and you'll see that it starts to come in a little bit, and that shows that it's working. So I pull across, and now I'm in the app switcher, and I can go back to any of these apps like that. So I'll do that again, hard on the edge. Now this sort of thing is not a huge game changer. I think it's quite useful, but it illustrates what we're getting from 3D Touch, is that you can do things more easily, you can do things quicker, because instead of having to do a double tap, you just do one force tap in a particular place. Number 7, and the last one I'm going to show you, is games. And this is my personal favourite activity on an iPhone. At the moment there are not many games that have this as a feature, but 3D Touch can be brought in as an additional interface option for a game. Now here, this is the big example at the moment. This is called AG Drive. So the accelerator will appear here. There it is. And if I just press normally, I'm terrible at this game by the way, I should warn you, but if I press normally I'm going quite slowly, but if I do a harder press, I'm now going at my maximum speed, and it's quite hard to explain it while I'm doing it. And the same applies to the brake, I believe. But this effectively means that instead of having one button on the right and one button on the left, I have a pressure sensitive button on the left and a pressure sensitive button on the right. And obviously this opens up more possibilities without making the game, this is crucial, without making the game any more complicated to control. Your fingers will know instinctively that if you want to go faster, you press harder. And it's nice. At the moment, as I said, there's really just this one game. There's a couple of other games that claim to have 3D Touch functionality, but they're not much to write home about. But I am excited, I will say that. I am optimistic about what's going to happen in the next few months as app developers get their hands on this technology, and I look forward to seeing what they come up with. So that's it for now. There will be more features added by Apple in future updates, and app developers themselves will add. I expect lots of these little shortcuts. You see that most of them at the moment don't have that. I expect many, many more of those to have their own little shortcuts, and they will have more interface features within the apps as well. I look forward to finding more. Let us know if you find any interesting ones that you think are worth shouting about. If you want to know anything else about the iPhone 6s and the iPhone 6s Plus, or 3D Touch, or iOS 9 for that matter, come to macworld.co.uk.